What really happened inside a medieval castle after the gates closed at night. If you are listening at night, tell me where you are and what time it is. Welcome to Dreamy Old Stories, where we share slow and gentle stories from history. These stories are made to calm your mind and help you fall asleep. The night is quiet now. Outside the stone walls, the countryside settles slowly into darkness. Wind moves softly through tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, a small stream continues its patient journey through the land, just as it has done for many years. Inside the castle, the world feels a little different. The walls are thick and old, made from heavy stone blocks placed carefully together by hands that lived long ago. These stones have watched many seasons pass. They have felt summer heat and winter frost. They have listened to footsteps, voices, laughter, and long stretches of silence. Tonight, like many nights before it, the castle rests. A few torches still glow along the walls of the courtyard. Their light moves gently across the stone surfaces, flickering in quiet patterns. The light is not strong. It does not try to chase away the darkness completely. It simply sits there, glowing softly, allowing shadows to stretch and breathe. High above the courtyard, narrow windows look out across the sleeping land. Inside those windows, people live their slow and ordinary lives. A castle may look like a place of power from the outside. Tall towers, heavy gates, strong walls. But inside, life moves in smaller ways. Daily routines, quiet work, small conversations. The kind of life that slowly fills a place with memory. If you were standing in the courtyard many centuries ago, perhaps sometime in the late evening, you might notice how calm everything feels. The large wooden gate is closed for the night. Iron bands hold the wood firmly in place. Just behind the gate sits the guard room, where one or two watchmen remain awake. They sit on wooden benches, sometimes talking softly, sometimes simply listening to the quiet sounds of the night. Their job is not always exciting. Most nights, nothing happens at all. They wait, they watch, and they pass the time. Not far from the gate stands the main tower of the castle, often called the keep. It rises higher than the other buildings, its stone walls thick and steady. The keep is the heart of the castle, where the lord and his family live, along with trusted servants and important rooms. But even inside the keep, life does not rush. A narrow staircase winds slowly upward through the stone interior. The steps are worn from years of use. Feet have climbed them thousands of times. Soldiers, servants, messengers, cooks, children, and sometimes tired travelers. The staircase turns gently as it climbs, like a slow spiral moving toward the upper floors. Torches sit in iron holders along the wall. Their light glows softly against the stone. The air smells faintly of smoke and warm wax. Somewhere above, a door closes quietly. It is late now, and many people inside the castle have already gone to sleep. Their sleeping rooms are simple. Thick wooden doors, narrow windows, heavy blankets to guard against the night air that slips through the stone walls. Beds are not always large or soft, but they are familiar, and familiarity is often enough. In one small room, a servant carefully folds a wool blanket before lying down. The day has been long. There was bread to bake, water to carry, and floors to sweep in the great hall. Small tasks that repeat day after day. But repetition has its own quiet rhythm. Across the corridor, another servant has already fallen asleep. The room is dark except for a faint line of moonlight passing through the narrow window. The castle breathes slowly in the night. Wood beams creak softly as the air cools. Somewhere below, a horse shifts its weight inside the stable. Hooves touch straw with a soft rustling sound. Animals live inside the castle walls too. Horses, of course, are very important. They carry riders across the countryside, pull carts, and sometimes carry armored knights during times of war. But tonight the horses rest quietly, their bodies warm beneath the wooden roof of the stable. A stable boy sleeps nearby on a simple straw mattress. He wakes easily if a horse grows restless. But most nights are calm. In another corner of the courtyard stands the kitchen building. During the day, it is one of the busiest places in the castle. Fires burn in large hearths. Pots hang above glowing coals. Cooks move slowly but steadily through their work, cutting vegetables, stirring thick stews, kneading dough for bread. But now the kitchen fire has faded. A faint warmth still lives inside the stone hearth, but the cooks have long since finished their tasks. Wooden tables sit quietly in the dim room. Clay bowls and iron pots rest where they were last placed. Tomorrow morning the kitchen will wake again. The first light of day will slip through the small windows, and someone will begin the slow work of preparing the morning meal. But that moment has not arrived yet. For now, the castle simply rests. If you walked slowly through the courtyard at this late hour, your footsteps would echo gently against the stone. The sound would travel along the walls and disappear somewhere above the towers. And perhaps you might notice something simple. A castle is not only a place of defense or authority. It is also a place where people wake up every morning, eat simple meals, carry water, mend clothes, and sweep floors. Children sometimes run across the courtyard during the day. Dogs wander through open doors. Someone might pause near the well to talk with a friend while drawing water. Small moments fill the space between the stones. And slowly, over many years, these small moments become the quiet life of the castle. Tonight, as the wind moves gently along the outer walls, most of those lives are sleeping. The guards remain awake. The horses breathe slowly in the stable. The torches continue their soft flicker. And high above the courtyard, inside rooms warmed by thick stone walls, the people of the castle rest, waiting for another ordinary day to arrive. Morning does not rush into the castle. It arrives slowly, almost quietly, as pale light begins to touch the tops of the stone towers. For a while, the courtyard remains half asleep. Shadows still stretch across the ground, and the cool air of the night lingers between the walls. The first sounds are small ones. A horse shifts in the stable. Straw rustles softly beneath its hooves. One of the stable boys wakes and sits up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He listens for a moment, as if checking whether the morning has truly begun. Soon after, a wooden door opens somewhere along the inner wall of the courtyard. A servant steps outside carrying an empty bucket. The metal handle clinks gently against the side as she walks toward the well. Her footsteps move slowly across the stone ground. There is no hurry yet. The day is only beginning. Water is one of the first tasks of every morning. The well sits near the center of the courtyard, protected by a simple wooden frame and a rope pulley worn smooth by many hands. The servant lowers the bucket into the darkness below. The rope slides through the wheel with a quiet creaking sound. A few moments later, the bucket returns filled with cool water. She lifts it carefully and begins the slow walk back toward the kitchens. Soon other servants will follow. Many buckets will travel this same path before the morning is finished. Inside the kitchen building, the air still holds a faint smell of last night's cooking. A cook enters and kneels beside the hearth. The ashes from the previous fire are gently moved aside. Small pieces of dry wood are placed together with patient hands. Soon a thin line of smoke rises, followed by the quiet crackle of new flame. Fire returns to the castle. The kitchen slowly wakes. Wooden bowls are arranged along the tables. A sack of grain is opened. Someone begins grinding flour with steady movements that have been repeated many mornings before. Bread will be kneaded today just as it was yesterday and the day before that. The rhythm of castle life often follows these simple needs. Food must be prepared. Animals must be fed. Floors must be swept. Tools must be repaired. The work is rarely dramatic, but it continues day after day, forming the steady pulse of life inside the walls. Above the kitchen, narrow windows begin to glow with the growing light of morning. In the great hall of the castle, the quiet darkness slowly fades. This large room is one of the most important spaces in the castle. It is where people gather to eat, speak, listen, and sometimes celebrate. Long wooden tables stretch across the room. Benches sit along their sides, worn smooth from years of use. At the far end of the hall stands the high table, slightly raised above the others. Here the lord of the castle sits with his family and honored guests. But early in the morning the hall is empty. Dust floats gently in the pale light entering through the tall windows. The stone floor feels cool beneath the air of the waking day. Soon servants will arrive to prepare the room. One servant begins placing cups along the tables. Another brushes small crumbs from the wooden surfaces. A third spreads fresh straw across parts of the floor to keep the room clean and dry. The work happens quietly, almost like a quiet dance of small movements. Not far above the great hall are the private chambers of the lord and his household. These rooms are more comfortable than many others in the castle, though comfort in medieval times often looks simpler than we might imagine. The walls are still stone. The windows are still narrow. But there are thicker blankets, carved wooden furniture, and sometimes colorful cloth hanging along the walls to soften the cold. In one of these chambers, the lord of the castle wakes slowly. Morning light slips through the window and touches the floor beside the bed. A servant enters quietly, carrying a small basin of water for washing. The water is cool, drawn recently from the well below. The lord sits up, still wrapped in heavy blankets. His day will include many responsibilities: listening to reports from messengers, speaking with advisors, checking the work of the lands beyond the castle walls. But even these duties move at a measured pace. Medieval life rarely rushes the way modern life often does. Messages travel slowly across long roads. Decisions unfold through conversation rather than sudden urgency. Much of the day is spent simply observing, listening, and thinking. In another part of the castle, children begin their morning. They move quietly through corridors that twist between stone walls. Their footsteps echo gently as they pass narrow windows overlooking the countryside. Some children belong to the lord's family. Others are the sons and daughters of knights or servants who live within the castle walls. They grow up surrounded by the routines of castle life. They learn where the kitchens are. They know which staircases lead to the towers. They know the quiet corners of the courtyard where cats often sleep in the sunlight. Sometimes they are taught reading or basic lessons by a tutor. Sometimes they simply explore the castle in slow wandering paths. The castle becomes their world. Below them, the courtyard grows more active as the morning continues. More doors open along the inner walls. Servants carry baskets of grain toward the stables. A blacksmith steps into his workshop and begins preparing the tools for the day's repairs. Soon the steady sound of metal striking metal will rise into the air. The castle blacksmith is an important figure here. Armor needs fixing. Horseshoes wear down after long rides. Hinges on heavy doors sometimes loosen and must be repaired. The blacksmith works with patience and strength, shaping metal through careful heat and steady hammer strikes. But even this work has its own calm rhythm. Clang, pause, clang. The sound travels softly across the courtyard and fades against the stone towers. Nearby, the castle baker begins shaping small rounds of dough. The smell of rising bread slowly fills the kitchen. Warm air drifts through the doorway and into the courtyard. Someone passing by pauses for a moment, breathing in the smell. Morning meals are usually simple. Bread, perhaps a bowl of porridge, sometimes cheese or small pieces of fruit depending on the season. It is enough to begin the day. People gather slowly in the great hall. Servants sit together along the lower tables. Knights and visiting travelers take seats nearby. Conversations remain quiet at first. Many are still waking fully from sleep. The Lord and his family arrive a little later, taking their places at the high table. There is no loud announcement. The room simply shifts as people notice their arrival. Meals inside a castle are moments when the many lives within the walls briefly come together. Farm workers from nearby fields might arrive with news from the countryside. Messengers bring letters from distant towns. A traveling merchant might sit quietly at the edge of the room, warming himself after a long journey. Stories move slowly between the tables. Sometimes they are about weather, sometimes about crops, sometimes about roads that have become muddy after heavy rain. Small stories that help the castle understand the world beyond its walls. And as the morning meal continues, the castle fully wakes. Doors open, voices rise slightly, footsteps cross the courtyard. Another ordinary day inside the stone walls has begun. The morning meal does not last very long. Bread disappears slowly from wooden plates. Bowls of porridge grow empty. Cups are lifted, set down, and lifted again. Conversations drift gently across the great hall, sometimes fading into quiet pauses where people simply sit and rest for a moment. No one rushes away too quickly. The day will continue for many hours, and there is always more work waiting beyond the hall. Eventually, benches move slightly as people stand. Servants begin gathering the used bowls and cups. A few crumbs remain on the long wooden tables, small reminders of the meal that has just passed. Outside the great hall, the courtyard now holds the steady movement of the day. The sun has climbed higher, touching the tops of the walls with pale warmth. Shadows that were long and soft during the early morning now shrink slowly toward the base of the towers. A pair of dogs wander across the open space, pausing now and then to sniff the ground or rest near a warm patch of sunlight. Near the well, two servants draw more water. The rope creaks quietly as the bucket travels down and back again. Water is always needed, for cooking, for washing, for the animals, and for many small tasks that fill the hours. Life inside the castle moves like this most days. Small work, quiet routines, familiar sounds. And slowly, through these simple actions, the castle continues to live. The day continues gently inside the castle walls. By now, the morning light has settled across the courtyard. The air feels a little warmer than before, though the thick stone buildings still hold the cool memory of the night. Sunlight reaches down between the towers and rests on the ground in quiet squares of brightness. People move through these patches of light as the day unfolds. Servants cross the courtyard carrying baskets or wooden tools. Their footsteps follow paths that have become familiar through long repetition. Some walk toward the kitchens. Others move toward the storage rooms or the stables. Every corner of the castle holds some small responsibility. Near the stable doors, the horses are fully awake now. Their breath rises softly in the cool air. One of the stable boys brushes the coat of a large brown horse, moving the brush slowly along its side. The horse stands patiently, occasionally shifting its weight or flicking its tail. Brushing the horses is quiet work. Dust and loose hair fall gently onto the straw-covered ground. The boy speaks softly to the animal, though the words are not very important. Horses seem to understand tone more than language. Not far away, another horse drinks from a wooden bucket filled with fresh water from the well. The stable smells of straw, leather, and warm animal breath. Sunlight slips through small openings in the wooden walls, forming narrow beams that hang quietly in the air. Outside the stable, a knight walks slowly across the courtyard. His armor is not yet fully worn for the day. Instead, he carries pieces of it in his arms as he moves toward the armory. The metal plates rest against each other with a dull clinking sound. Armor is heavy and must be cared for carefully. Inside the armory, racks of helmets and shields line the walls. Swords hang beside spears and crossbows. Each piece has its place. The castle depends on these tools for protection, even if they are not needed every day. The knight places his armor on a wooden table where another man waits. This man works as the castle armorer. His hands move slowly across the metal surface, checking straps and hinges. Leather ties sometimes loosen after long use. Small dents may appear after training. The armorer repairs these things patiently. He does not rush. Metal work requires steady attention. While they speak quietly about the condition of the armor, the sounds of the courtyard continue outside the armory door. A cart rolls slowly across the stone ground. Its wooden wheels create a low rumbling sound that echoes gently against the walls. The cart carries sacks of grain. 2 workers guide the horse that pulls it. The sacks will be stored in one of the castle storerooms where food supplies are kept safe and dry. These supplies are important, especially during winter months when fresh crops are harder to gather. Inside the storeroom, the air feels cool and still. Shelves hold jars of preserved food. Wooden barrels sit along the walls filled with grain, dried beans, and sometimes salted meat. Thick walls help keep the temperature steady throughout the year. A steward stands near the entrance, carefully observing what arrives and what leaves. The steward keeps track of the castle's supplies. It is quiet work, but it requires careful thought. If food runs low during a long winter, the entire castle could suffer. So he watches each delivery closely. A small notebook rests in his hand. He makes simple marks as the sacks are carried inside. Across the courtyard, the blacksmith's workshop grows louder as the day progresses. The fire in the forge burns bright now. Heat fills the small room as metal glows red inside the flames. The blacksmith lifts a hammer and brings it down carefully against a heated piece of iron. Clang. The sound rings out across the courtyard. Then silence for a moment while the metal is turned. Clang. Each strike shapes the iron a little more. The rhythm continues slowly, steady, and patient. People passing through the courtyard barely notice it anymore. The sound has become part of daily life inside the castle. Nearby, 2 young boys pause to watch from a safe distance. They stand quietly for a moment, observing the sparks that jump from the metal each time the hammer falls. The blacksmith notices them but says nothing. Watching is often the first step in learning. Eventually, the boys wander away again, drawn toward another part of the courtyard. Children inside a castle often spend their days exploring small corners of the stone buildings. The castle can feel like a maze of hallways and staircases, each turn revealing another doorway or narrow passage. Some stairs climb toward the towers. Others descend into cooler spaces beneath the castle where food is stored or where supplies are kept during times of trouble. These lower rooms feel quiet and heavy with still air, but most of the life of the castle remains above ground. Near the inner wall, a group of women sit together in a patch of sunlight. Their hands move slowly as they work with cloth and thread. One repairs a torn sleeve. Another carefully stitches a new piece of fabric onto a worn cloak. Sewing requires patience and steady fingers. The women speak quietly while they work. Their conversation moves gently from one small topic to another. Perhaps they talk about the weather. Perhaps about a traveler who arrived the day before. Perhaps about a child who has recently learned to walk. Simple conversations that pass the time. Sometimes laughter appears, soft and brief, before the quiet returns again. Above them, along the upper walkway of the castle wall, A guard continues his slow patrol. He walks from one tower to the next, looking out across the countryside beyond the walls. From this height, the land stretches far into the distance. Fields, small roads, clusters of trees, and the roofs of distant cottages. Most days, the view changes very little. Farmers move slowly across the fields far away. Smoke rises from cooking fires in nearby villages. Occasionally, a rider appears on the distant road. The guard notices these small movements and continues walking. His steps echo softly along the stone walkway. Below him, the castle courtyard remains busy, but never hurried. Each person moves according to the quiet rhythm of their work. In the kitchen, the cooks have already begun preparing the next meal. Vegetables are chopped on wooden tables. A pot of broth warms slowly above the fire. Someone carries in fresh herbs gathered from a small garden growing near the inner wall. The smell of cooking drifts into the courtyard again. A passing servant pauses for a moment, breathing in the scent before continuing toward the well with another empty bucket. The castle continues its day in this gentle way. Small tasks, quiet voices, the steady movement of many lives sharing the same walls. And above it all, the tall towers remain silent and watchful, just as they have been for many years. As the morning moves slowly toward midday, the castle settles into a steady rhythm. The early chill has mostly faded now. Sunlight reaches deeper into the courtyard, warming the stone ground where people walk back and forth through their daily work. The light rests along the walls and slowly climbs higher toward the windows of the upper floors. From a distance, the castle might still appear silent and strong, its towers rising above the surrounding land. But inside the walls, life continues in small and patient movements. In the great hall, a few servants remain busy after the morning meal. Wooden tables are wiped clean with damp cloths. Cups are stacked together and carried back toward the kitchen. The floor is swept slowly with wide brushes made from bundled twigs. Dust gathers in quiet corners, and someone patiently moves it away. The hall feels larger when it is empty. Voices that filled the room earlier have faded, leaving only the soft sounds of work. A broom brushing across stone. The quiet scrape of a bench being moved slightly back into place. Light passes through the tall windows and spreads across the floor like a pale sheet. Near the far wall, a large fireplace sits dark and silent for now. Its stones still remember the warmth of many past fires, though today the room does not need heating. During winter, this fireplace becomes the warm center of the hall, drawing people close to its steady glow. But today the air remains gentle. Beyond the hall, the castle corridors hold their usual quiet calm. These passageways are narrow and sometimes dim, with small windows that allow thin lines of light to slip inside. The stone floors carry the sound of footsteps easily. A servant carrying folded cloth walks down one corridor, her steps soft but noticeable in the stillness. At the end of the hallway, a wooden door opens slowly. Inside the room beyond sits a small group gathered around a table. The lord of the castle is there, along with 2 advisors and a messenger who arrived earlier in the morning. The messenger's travel cloak rests across the back of his chair. Dust from the road still clings to the fabric. He speaks quietly now, describing news from a nearby town. The conversation moves slowly, with long pauses between sentences. Messages in these times often arrive after many days of travel, so there is rarely a need for sudden decisions. The Lord listens carefully. Sometimes he nods. Sometimes he asks a short question. At other moments, he simply sits quietly, thinking. These discussions may continue for a while, but the mood remains calm and thoughtful rather than urgent. Outside in the courtyard, a different kind of conversation takes place near the well. 2 servants pause for a moment while lifting another bucket of water. The rope creaks as it moves over the wooden wheel. One servant wipes her hands on her apron before lifting the bucket carefully onto the stone edge. They speak quietly while catching their breath. The well has always been a place where short conversations happen. People come and go throughout the day, and for a few moments their paths cross beside the cool water below. Soon they lift the bucket together and carry it away toward the kitchens. The courtyard grows slightly quieter for a moment as several workers move indoors. The blacksmith has paused his hammering while waiting for a new piece of metal to heat inside the forge. Without the sound of metal striking iron, the space feels different. The wind moves gently along the walls, carrying the faint smell of smoke from the forge and the warm scent of cooking from the kitchen building. Above the courtyard, the castle towers watch over everything. Inside one of these towers, a narrow staircase climbs slowly upward toward a small room near the top. The steps twist around a central column of stone, forming a spiral that has been walked by many feet over the years. A guard climbs these steps now. His pace is slow and steady. The climb is familiar, and there is no need to rush. Each step brings him closer to the small chamber above where narrow windows look out across the countryside. When he reaches the top, he pauses for a moment beside one of the windows. From here, the land stretches far beyond the castle walls. Fields lie in soft patterns across the landscape. Thin roads curve gently between villages and farms. In the distance, a small river glints quietly beneath the midday sun. Movement on the roads is slow. A cart travels along one path, its shape small against the wide land. Farther away, a few farmers work in a field, their motions so distant they appear almost still. The guard watches these scenes quietly. His work is mostly observation. Most days the land remains peaceful, and his watch passes in long stretches of calm silence. Back in the courtyard below, a young apprentice enters the blacksmith's workshop carrying a bundle of wooden handles. The blacksmith nods and takes one, testing its weight in his hand. These handles will soon be fitted to tools or small weapons. Every object inside the castle must be maintained carefully. Nothing lasts forever without attention. The forge fire crackles softly again as the metal inside reaches the proper heat. Soon the hammer will begin its steady rhythm once more. Nearby, the castle baker checks a row of bread loaves resting inside the oven. Warm air escapes as the oven door opens slightly. The smell of fresh bread drifts out into the kitchen and slowly into the courtyard beyond. It is a simple smell, but one that almost everyone inside the castle recognizes immediately. Bread is a quiet center of daily life. Flour, water, and patient waiting. The baker presses gently on one loaf to test its firmness before closing the oven again. Outside, the sun continues its slow journey across the sky. The shadows of the towers move gradually across the courtyard stones. People step through them without thinking, moving between light and shade as their work carries them from place to place. A dog curls up beside the warm wall of the great hall and closes its eyes. For a while, the castle breathes in calm silence. The work continues, the conversations drift, and the long day inside the medieval castle moves forward at its steady and familiar pace as midday slowly approaches. The light in the courtyard becomes softer and warmer. The sun now sits higher above the towers, and the shadows along the stone ground grow shorter. The air carries the mixed smells of bread, warm metal from the forge, and the faint scent of animals from the stable. None of these smells feel unusual. They belong to the castle, just as much as the walls and towers that are in the kitchen. The cooks continue their patient work. A large pot rests above the fire, its surface moving gently as the broth warms. One cook stirs the pot slowly while another slices vegetables into careful pieces. The sound of the knife touching the wooden table is soft and steady from time to time. A servant enters to collect a small tray of bread or a bowl of broth for someone working elsewhere in the castle. Meals do not always happen at the same moment for everyone. Some people eat when their work allows a short pause. Outside, the blacksmith's hammer has begun again. The sound moves across the courtyard and fades against the stone walls. It is a sound that many people inside the castle barely notice anymore. Like the wind or the creak of doors, it has become part of the quiet background of the day. Near the well, another bucket of water rises slowly from the darkness below. The rope creaks. Water drips quietly from the bucket as it reaches the surface. And just like that, another small task of castle life is completed as the day continues forward. The afternoon arrives without any clear signal. There is no bell that announces it to the entire castle. Instead, the change happens quietly, almost unnoticed, as the sun begins its slow journey toward the western side of the sky. The light that once rested in the center of the courtyard now leans gently toward one wall. Shadows return again, though they are not yet long. The castle continues its quiet rhythm. By now, many of the morning tasks have been completed. Floors have been swept. Water has been carried. Bread has been baked and placed carefully in baskets. The horses have been brushed and fed. But a castle never truly runs out of work. In the courtyard, a group of workers gathers near a wooden cart filled with firewood. The wood has been brought from nearby forests outside the castle walls. Thick pieces of oak and ash lie stacked together, their rough bark carrying the smell of the forest. Two servants begin carrying the wood toward the kitchen building. Each piece is placed carefully near the hearth where the fire will continue burning throughout the day. A strong and steady fire is important inside a castle kitchen. It warms the rooms, cooks the meals, and provides a place where people naturally gather during colder seasons. Even in warmer weather, the fire remains a quiet center of activity. Inside the great hall, the room remains calm and mostly empty. Sunlight enters through the tall windows, creating wide shapes of light along the stone floor. Dust moves slowly in the air, drifting in gentle patterns that almost seem to float without purpose. At one of the long tables, a young servant carefully polishes a set of metal cups. He works slowly, turning each cup in his hands while rubbing the surface with a cloth. The metal catches the light as it moves, briefly reflecting the bright window before settling back into a softer shine. Polishing cups may seem like a small task, but it is one that must be repeated often. Objects inside the castle are used every day, and daily use slowly leaves its marks. Across the hall, another servant arranges a stack of wooden plates onto a shelf near the wall. The plates are simple but sturdy, carved from thick pieces of wood many years ago. Some of them carry small scratches and marks from long use, but they still serve their purpose well. Outside again, the courtyard remains alive with quiet movement. A messenger prepares to leave the castle after resting from his journey. His horse waits patiently near the gate, its saddle already secured. The guard near the gate speaks briefly with the rider before the heavy wooden doors are opened just wide enough for the horse to pass. For a moment, the outside world appears clearly through the gate. A narrow road stretches away across the fields. Wind moves gently through tall grass along its sides. Then the rider guides his horse forward, and the gate slowly closes again behind him. The castle returns to its quiet enclosure. Near the stable boys continue their work. One carries a bucket of grain while another spreads fresh straw along the floor of a stall. The horses watch with calm eyes as the boys move through the stable. A horse lowers its head and begins eating slowly, the sound of chewing soft and steady. Animals bring their own quiet presence into the castle. They do not worry about schedules or plans. They eat when food is offered and rest when the day grows calm. Sometimes their quiet patience spreads gently to the people who care for them. Not far from the stable stands a small training yard. This space is surrounded by low wooden fences and patches of worn ground where many footsteps have passed. It is here that knights and soldiers practice their skills when the day allows time. This afternoon, two knights stand facing each other with wooden practice swords. Their movements are careful and controlled. The sound of wood striking wood carries lightly across the courtyard. They step forward, then back, testing balance and strength. A few soldiers watch from the side, offering occasional quiet comments. Training is important, even when the castle is peaceful. Skills must remain ready, but even this activity does not feel rushed or loud. The movements happen at a measured pace, with long pauses between each exchange. Nearby, a young boy watches with wide curiosity. He sits on a low stone near the fence, resting his chin on his hands as he observes the training. Perhaps one day he hopes to wear armor like the knights, or perhaps he simply enjoys watching the slow and careful movements. In castles, many children grow up surrounded by these scenes. They watch adults perform their duties day after day. They learn simply by observing. Across the courtyard, near a sunny section of the inner wall, a small garden grows. The garden is not large, but it is useful. Rows of herbs and vegetables stretch across the soil in careful lines. Mint, onions, and small leafy plants grow quietly beneath the afternoon sun. A woman kneels beside the plants, gently pulling away small weeds that appear between them. Gardens require patience. They grow slowly, just as castle life moves slowly. Each plant needs water, sunlight, and time. The woman brushes soil from her hands and leans back slightly, looking across the courtyard for a moment before returning to her work. Above the garden, along the high stone wall, ivy has begun to climb upward in thin green lines. The plant grips the stone carefully, reaching toward the light. The castle walls have stood here for many years, and slowly, quietly, nature begins to touch them as well. A breeze moves across the courtyard, stirring loose leaves near the ground. Somewhere above, a bird lands briefly on the edge of a tower before flying away again toward the distant fields. The castle does not try to control every small moment. It simply holds its space within the land. Inside the kitchen, preparations for the evening meal have already begun. Large pots rest above the fire again. The cooks move slowly between tables, measuring ingredients and checking the steady heat of the flames. The smell of herbs and warm broth drifts gently into the air. And so the afternoon continues. Footsteps cross the courtyard. Doors open and close. The castle remains calm, patient, and quietly alive as the long day moves forward. The afternoon continues in its slow and steady way. By now, the sun has begun leaning slightly toward the western sky. The light that once filled the courtyard from above now arrives at a softer angle, touching the walls and towers in long, quiet shapes. Inside the castle, the pace of work remains calm. In the training yard, the knights have finished their practice for the moment. Wooden swords rest against the fence, and the men sit along a low bench to catch their breath. One removes his gloves and flexes his fingers slowly. Training does not always last very long. The purpose is not endless movement, but careful practice. A few controlled strikes, a few moments of balance, and the body remembers what it must do. After a short rest, the knights stand again and gather their equipment. Some return toward the armory where their armor and weapons are stored. Others walk toward the great hall or the courtyard well. Their footsteps move calmly across the stone ground. Nearby, the young boy who had been watching them slowly stands and wanders away. His curiosity shifts toward another corner of the courtyard where the stable doors stand open. Inside the stable, the horses remain peaceful. One horse lifts its head as the boy approaches, ears turning slightly to notice the new presence. The boy steps closer, careful and quiet, and rests his hand gently along the animal's neck. The horse exhales slowly, warm breath moving into the cool air of the stable. Moments like this happen often inside a castle. Small quiet encounters between people and animals, between work and rest. Across the courtyard, the blacksmith has finally stepped away from the forge for a short break. His hammer rests on the wooden table beside the anvil. The fire still burns inside the forge, glowing softly while the metal tools cool nearby. The blacksmith sits on a low stool outside his workshop. He wipes sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of his shirt and drinks from a wooden cup. The water is simple but refreshing after standing beside the heat of the forge. For a few minutes he simply sits there, watching the quiet activity of the courtyard. A servant walks past carrying folded cloth. Two soldiers speak quietly near the gate. A dog wanders slowly along the wall before settling down again in the shade. The castle rarely becomes completely silent, but there are moments when the sounds soften enough to notice the small details. Wind brushing lightly against the stone. The faint creak of wood as a door opens somewhere above. A distant bird calling from beyond the walls. Inside the great hall, preparations for the evening meal continue. Several servants have returned to arrange the tables once again. Wooden benches are placed carefully along the long rows. Clay cups are set out beside each place where someone will soon sit. A servant spreads fresh cloth along the high table where the lord and his family will dine later. The cloth is simple but clean, its pale color bright against the darker wood of the table. Light from the tall windows falls across the room, creating long shapes across the floor. The hall feels calm and spacious, holding a quiet expectation for the evening gathering that will arrive later. Near the entrance to the hall, a pair of traveling merchants sit quietly on a bench. They arrived earlier in the day and have been given permission to rest within the castle before continuing their journey tomorrow. Their travel packs sit beside them, filled with small goods gathered from distant towns. One merchant examines a small piece of cloth while the other leans back against the wall. Travel can be long and tiring. The castle offers them a safe place to pause for a while. Above the great hall, along one of the upper corridors, a young servant carries a basket of freshly washed cloth. The corridor is narrow, and the stone walls feel cool even in the afternoon warmth. Small windows allow thin streams of light to enter, illuminating the dust that floats quietly in the air. The servant moves carefully along the passage before entering one of the sleeping chambers. Inside, the room is simple. A wooden bed rests against the wall beneath a narrow window. A small table stands nearby holding a candle and a clay cup. The servant places the folded cloth neatly on the bed before leaving the room again. Rooms like this fill the upper floors of the castle. Some belong to servants. Others belong to knights or visiting guests. Each room holds the quiet marks of daily life. Footsteps, sleep, conversation, moments that come and go without much notice. Back outside, the garden along the inner wall glows softly beneath the afternoon sun. The woman who had been tending the plants earlier now waters them using a small wooden bucket. She pours the water slowly along the soil near each plant, careful not to disturb the delicate leaves. The scent of fresh herbs rises gently from the garden. A passing servant pauses briefly to look at the green rows before continuing across the courtyard. The garden is small, but it offers something living and soft within the stone walls. Above it, the ivy continues its slow climb upward along the castle wall. The plant grows little by little each season. No one notices its progress day by day, but over many years it spreads across the stone like a quiet memory of time passing. On the wall walk above, the guard continues his steady patrol. His steps follow the familiar path between towers. He glances outward across the land, then back toward the courtyard below. Everything appears calm. The fields in the distance move gently beneath the afternoon breeze. The narrow roads remain mostly empty. A faint trail of smoke rises from a distant farmhouse. The guard rests his hands on the stone edge of the wall and watches for a moment. Most days pass like this, quiet, steady. The castle stands strong and patient above the land, while the people inside continue their simple work. And as the afternoon slowly drifts forward, the light begins to soften even more, preparing the castle for the quiet hours that will follow. The afternoon continues to soften as the sun moves slowly across the sky. Light touches the upper stones of the towers before sliding gently downward along the walls. The courtyard feels warmer than it did earlier, though the breeze moving through the open space keeps the air calm and comfortable. Work inside the castle has not stopped, but it moves with an easy rhythm now. Near the well, another servant lowers the bucket into the dark water below. The rope slides through the wooden wheel with its familiar quiet creak. When the bucket rises again, the surface of the water catches the sunlight for a brief moment before the servant lifts it carefully away. Across the courtyard, the stable doors remain open. The horses stand quietly in their stalls, chewing grain or resting their heads along the wooden rails. A stable boy sweeps loose straw into a small pile near the entrance. Each movement of the broom pushes the straw gently across the floor. The smell of hay and warm animals drifts slowly outward into the courtyard. Nearby, the blacksmith has returned to his work. The hammer rises and falls in its steady rhythm once again. Each strike against the iron sends a soft echo across the stone walls. Sparks jump briefly from the glowing metal before fading in the air. Clang. Pause. Clang. The sound blends naturally into the quiet life of the castle. In the great hall, the light has begun to stretch longer across the floor. Servants finish arranging the final cups and plates for the evening meal that will come later. For now, the room rests in calm silence. A dog wanders through the open doorway and circles twice near the wall before lying down on the cool stone floor. The animal sighs softly and closes its eyes. The castle, like the dog, seems content simply to rest for a moment while the long afternoon continues. The afternoon slowly begins to lean toward evening. The sun has moved far enough across the sky that the light now enters the courtyard from a lower angle. Long shapes stretch across the stone ground again. The towers cast wide shadows that reach slowly toward the center of the open space. Inside the castle, the day continues with the same quiet patience it has carried since morning. Work does not stop suddenly. It simply changes its rhythm. Near the kitchen building, a servant carries a basket filled with fresh vegetables from the small garden along the inner wall. Leaves of green herbs rest beside onions and small roots still dusted with soil. The servant walks carefully across the courtyard, holding the basket close to keep the vegetables from spilling. Inside the kitchen, the cooks are already preparing the evening meal. The fire in the hearth burns steadily, sending soft waves of heat into the room. One cook stirs a pot slowly while another washes vegetables in a wooden bowl filled with cool water. The smell of herbs rises gently as they are cut into smaller pieces. The kitchen always feels warm during this time of day. Wood crackles softly in the fire. Pots shift slightly as they warm. Someone moves quietly between the tables carrying bowls or baskets. Outside, the courtyard remains active but calm. Two soldiers walk slowly toward the gate, speaking quietly to one another. Their conversation is not loud enough to travel far, but their voices mix with the other small sounds of the castle. Footsteps across stone, the distant hammer of the blacksmith, the creak of the well rope rising and falling. These sounds repeat day after day, forming the gentle music of castle life. Near the stable, the horses stand peacefully as the stable boys continue their work. One boy brushes the mane of a tall gray horse, moving the brush through the hair with long, steady strokes. Another boy checks the straps of a saddle resting on a wooden rack nearby. Leather must be cared for carefully. If it dries too much, it can crack. If it becomes wet too often, it weakens. So the boys wipe the straps slowly with small cloths, keeping the leather smooth and strong. The horses watch quietly, their ears turning slightly toward the sounds around them. Animals inside the castle become familiar with these daily routines. They learn the voices of the people who care for them. They recognize the sound of grain being poured into feeding troughs. They know when the stable doors open in the morning and close again at night. Just beyond the stable stands the armory. Inside, the armorer continues his patient work at a wooden table. A helmet rests before him as he checks the leather strap that holds it in place. The strap has begun to loosen after long use. With careful hands, he removes it and replaces it with a new piece of leather. The work is quiet and precise. Metal armor may appear strong and unchanging, but every piece requires attention over time. Small repairs prevent larger problems later. Across the courtyard, near the inner wall, the small garden remains peaceful beneath the soft afternoon light. The woman who has been tending the plants throughout the day kneels once again beside the rows of herbs. She presses loose soil gently around the base of one plant and removes a small weed from another. The garden grows slowly but steadily. Each leaf moves slightly in the breeze that drifts along the stone walls. Bees sometimes visit the small flowers that appear among the plants. The garden offers a quiet place within the busy castle. Not far away, children wander along the edge of the courtyard. Two boys pause beside the training yard fence where the knights practiced earlier in the day. The ground inside the yard shows the marks of many footsteps. Small patches of dirt lie scattered where boots once pressed into the soil. The boys step carefully into the yard and pick up two wooden practice swords left leaning against the fence. Their movements are slower and less skilled than the knights who trained here earlier. They swing the wooden swords gently, trying to copy the motions they saw before. Wood taps lightly against wood. They laugh quietly before lowering the swords again. Moments like these are common inside the castle. Children watch the adults around them and slowly learn the ways of the place where they live. Above the courtyard, along the high stone wall, the guard continues his familiar walk. His path takes him past narrow towers that rise along the wall like silent watchers. From time to time, he pauses beside one of the openings to look outward across the countryside. The land beyond the castle remains calm. Fields stretch across the distance in soft colors of green and brown. Small farms sit quietly among clusters of trees. Thin roads wind between villages, carrying the occasional traveler or cart. From this height, the world appears slow and steady. The guard listens to the wind moving across the fields and then continues his walk along the stone path. Below him, the castle continues its quiet life. Inside the great hall, a servant lights a few early candles along the walls. Even though the sun has not yet set, the light inside the hall grows dim as the afternoon continues. The candles add a soft glow that moves gently across the wooden tables. Soon people will gather here again for the evening meal. But for now, the room waits patiently. A few servants finish their tasks and step outside into the courtyard once more. The air feels calm. The long day inside the medieval castle continues to move forward, slowly guiding everyone toward the quiet hours of evening. The afternoon slowly deepens as the sun continues its quiet path across the sky. Light now falls gently against the western walls of the castle. The stone surfaces glow with a soft warmth, and the courtyard begins to feel calmer than it did earlier in the day. Many of the heavier tasks have already been completed, and people move with a slightly slower pace. Inside the kitchen, the evening meal continues to take shape. The large pot over the fire releases a slow stream of steam into the warm air. One cook lifts the lid and stirs the contents carefully, allowing the smell of herbs and broth to spread through the room. Another cook slices bread that was baked earlier in the day, arranging the pieces neatly on wooden trays. The fire crackles softly as new pieces of wood are added to keep the heat steady. Servants enter and leave the kitchen carrying small bowls, cups, and trays. Their footsteps follow familiar paths across the stone floor. No one speaks loudly. The work itself fills the room with quiet purpose. Outside, the courtyard continues to hold the gentle sounds of castle life. A servant crosses the open space carrying a bundle of folded cloth. The cloth has been washed and dried during the afternoon and now must be returned to the rooms above the great hall. The servant walks slowly toward a narrow staircase that climbs along the inner wall. The steps are worn smooth by many years of use. Each step carries the quiet memory of thousands of footsteps that have passed there before. Above the courtyard, the castle corridors remain cool and dim. The thick stone walls hold the chill of earlier hours even as the outside air grows warmer. The servant moves along the hallway and pauses beside a small window. From here, the courtyard can be seen below. People move quietly between buildings, their shadows stretching slightly longer across the ground. The servant watches for a moment before continuing down the corridor. Back in the courtyard, the blacksmith's hammer has slowed. The last piece of metal for the day rests on the anvil as the blacksmith examines his work. The iron tool now holds its finished shape after many careful strikes. He lifts it and turns it in the light, checking the edges with practiced eyes. Satisfied, he places the tool aside and allows the forge fire to settle into a quieter glow. The workshop becomes calmer without the steady sound of hammer strikes. The blacksmith wipes his hands on a cloth and steps outside, stretching his arms slightly after the long hours of work. The air feels cooler away from the heat of the forge. Nearby, the stable boys begin their evening preparations. Fresh straw is spread across the stable floor. Water buckets are checked and filled again from the well. The horses shift quietly inside their stalls, some lowering their heads to eat while others simply rest. One horse leans its head gently over the wooden rail as a stable boy passes by. The boy pauses for a moment and runs his hand along the animal's neck before returning to his work. These small gestures appear often inside the castle. Work and quiet companionship exist side by side. Near the center of the courtyard, the well remains busy even in the late afternoon. Water continues to be drawn for cooking, cleaning, and washing. The rope moves slowly over the wooden wheel. The bucket disappears into the darkness and returns filled with cool water. The sound of dripping water marks the end of another small task. Across the courtyard, the training yard now sits empty. The wooden practice swords have been placed neatly against the fence. The worn ground inside the yard rests undisturbed for the moment. A breeze moves gently through the open space, stirring dust and small leaves along the ground. Children who played there earlier have wandered toward other corners of the castle. Some sit near the garden watching insects move among the plants. Others explore the quiet hallways inside the keep. The castle offers many places to discover. Narrow staircases climb toward towers where views stretch across the land. Lower rooms hold cool storage spaces filled with barrels and jars. Long corridors lead to doors that open into simple sleeping chambers. Each path inside the castle feels both familiar and mysterious to those who live there. Along the high wall walk, the guard continues his slow patrol. His steps follow the same route he has walked many times before. He pauses occasionally beside the stone edge to observe the countryside beyond the walls. The land now carries the warm color of late afternoon. Fields glow softly beneath the lowering sun. Distant trees stand still against the wide sky. A cart travels slowly along one of the narrow roads far away. From this height, the movement of the world appears calm and distant. The guard watches quietly for a few moments before continuing his walk toward the next tower. Inside the great hall, the candles lit earlier now flicker more clearly as the natural light begins to fade. Servants move between the tables, placing the final cups and bowls for the evening meal. The high table at the end of the hall is prepared carefully, its cloth smooth and its chairs arranged in their proper places. The hall waits. Soon the people of the castle will gather again. Conversations will rise softly among the long tables. The smell of warm food will drift through the room. But for now, the castle rests in the gentle calm of late afternoon. Outside, the sky continues to shift slowly toward evening. Shadows lengthen across the courtyard stones. And within the steady walls of the castle, the quiet life of its people continues without hurry. The light of the day begins to soften as evening slowly approaches. The sun now sits lower in the sky, and the shadows inside the courtyard stretch long across the stone ground. The warm color of the light touches the walls of the castle towers, giving the old stones a gentle glow before the day begins to fade. The courtyard grows slightly quieter. Many of the day's larger tasks have already been finished. Tools are returned to their places. Buckets that carried water from the well now rest beside the kitchen door. The forge fire in the blacksmith's workshop burns lower, glowing softly instead of roaring with heat. Inside the stable, the horses settle into a calm evening rhythm. Some stand quietly in their stalls while others lower themselves slowly onto the straw to rest. The stable boys check the gates of each stall one last time before stepping outside into the fading light. They pause for a moment near the doorway, looking across the courtyard where the first lamps are beginning to glow. Near the entrance of the great hall, a servant lights another candle along the wall. The small flame flickers gently before growing steady. One by one, a few more candles are lit, their soft light spreading slowly through the large room. The evening gathering will begin soon. Outside, the air feels cooler as the day slowly moves toward night. The castle continues to breathe in its calm and patient way. Evening settles slowly across the castle. The last light of the sun rests along the tops of the towers before slipping quietly beyond the distant hills. The sky above the courtyard changes color little by little, moving from pale gold to softer shades of blue and gray. Inside the castle walls, the rhythm of the day begins to shift again. The courtyard, which held steady movement throughout the afternoon, now grows calmer. Fewer footsteps cross the open space. Doors close gently as the final tasks of the day come to an end. But the castle is not yet asleep. Inside the great hall, the first people begin to gather for the evening meal. The hall glows softly with candlelight. Small flames flicker along the walls, their light moving across the wooden tables and stone floor. The long benches that sat empty during the afternoon now welcome quiet groups of people returning from their work. Servants arrive first. They take their places along the lower tables, speaking softly as they sit. Some rub tired hands after a long day of carrying water or sweeping floors. Others simply rest their arms on the table while waiting for the meal to begin. Soon the kitchen doors open. The smell of warm food drifts slowly into the hall. Two cooks carry a large pot between them, placing it carefully on the table where servants can begin filling bowls. Bread that was baked earlier in the day rests in wide baskets nearby. The food is simple: a bowl of stew, a piece of bread, sometimes a bit of cheese, or a handful of cooked vegetables. It is enough to satisfy the hunger that builds after a full day of work. People begin to eat quietly. Wooden spoons touch the sides of bowls. Bread is broken slowly by hand. Conversations begin to rise gently across the room, though the voices remain calm and unhurried. At the far end of the hall, the high table waits. A servant straightens the cloth across its surface before stepping back toward the wall. After a short while, the lord of the castle enters the hall with several members of the household. Their arrival does not interrupt the quiet mood of the room. People notice them and continue eating, though a few heads bow slightly in greeting. The lord takes his place at the high table, and servants bring small dishes prepared especially for that part of the hall. Meals inside the castle are moments when many lives meet in the same space. Knights sit beside visiting travelers. Servants speak quietly with stable boys. Messengers who arrived during the day share small pieces of news from distant towns. Stories travel across the tables. Sometimes someone speaks about the weather in the fields outside the castle walls. Sometimes about a merchant who passed along the road earlier that day. At other times, the stories are small and simple, describing nothing more than a tool that broke or a horse that refused to move. Even the smallest stories help pass the time. While the hall fills with quiet conversation, the courtyard outside becomes darker. The sky above the walls now holds the deep color of early night. A few torches burn along the inner wall, their flames moving slowly in the evening air. Near the gate, the guards remain at their posts. One guard leans lightly against the stone wall while the other walks a short distance along the gate path before turning back again. Their watch continues through the night just as it did the night before. Beyond the closed gate, the road lies silent beneath the fading light. Inside the stable, the horses have grown very still. Most of them rest quietly in the straw. One horse shifts its weight slowly before settling again. The stable smells of hay and warm breath, a calm and steady scent that fills the dim space. A stable boy lights a small lantern near the entrance before stepping outside. He looks across the courtyard toward the great hall where the soft glow of candles can be seen through the windows. For a moment he simply stands there, listening to the quiet sounds of the castle evening. Then he walks slowly toward the hall to join the others for the meal. Inside the hall, the sound of eating continues. Bowls empty gradually. Bread baskets grow lighter. A servant moves between the tables collecting cups that have already been used. The warmth of the room spreads gently as more people gather inside. Near the center table, a knight tells a short story about a journey he once made across the countryside during a heavy winter storm. His voice remains calm, and the story carries no great excitement, only the quiet memory of a difficult road and deep snow. Those sitting nearby listen while finishing their meal. At the far side of the hall, the traveling merchants who arrived earlier sit together with their bowls of stew. They speak quietly about the road they will travel tomorrow when they leave the castle. Their packs rest beside the bench where they sit. Travelers often bring new stories into the castle, but tonight their voices remain low and peaceful. The great hall slowly fills with the comfortable sound of many people sharing the same space. Candle flames flicker gently along the walls. Shadows move across the stone floor as people shift in their seats. And outside, beyond the tall castle walls, the quiet night spreads slowly across the land. The evening meal continues at an unhurried pace. Inside the great hall, the candles burn steadily now. Their small flames move gently whenever someone passes nearby, causing soft shadows to shift along the stone walls. The room feels warmer than it did earlier, filled with the quiet presence of many people sitting together after a long day. Bowls are nearly empty now. A few pieces of bread remain in the baskets placed along the tables. Wooden cups are lifted slowly for the last drinks of the meal. Conversations move gently across the hall, rising and fading like small waves. Some people speak about the work that filled their day. A stable boy describes how one of the horses refused to move when it was time to return to the stable. A servant quietly explains that the kitchen fire burned too hot during the afternoon and had to be lowered. These are simple stories. No one expects them to be exciting. They are simply pieces of the day being shared among those who lived it. At the high table, the lord and members of the household finish their meal as well. Servants move quietly beside them, removing empty dishes and replacing cups when needed. The tone of the hall remains calm. No one rushes to leave the table. After a full day of work, the hall offers a place where people can sit for a little while longer before the night deepens. Outside the great hall, the courtyard has grown darker. Only the light from torches and a few lanterns breaks the darkness now. Their glow touches the stone ground in small circles of orange light. Between those circles, the courtyard rests in deep shadow. The night air feels cooler than it did during the afternoon. A breeze moves slowly between the buildings, carrying the faint smell of the evening meal from the hall windows. Near the stable door, a lantern hangs from a wooden hook. Its light reveals the quiet shapes of the horses resting inside. Most of them stand calmly in their stalls with their heads lowered. The stable boys have finished their work for the day. Fresh straw lies across the floor. Buckets of water stand beside each stall. The stable door remains slightly open to allow air to move through the building. Occasionally, one horse shifts its weight, causing the straw to rustle softly. Otherwise, the stable remains peaceful. Near the gate, the guards continue their watch. One guard walks slowly along the inside of the gate path, his footsteps steady on the stone ground. The other stands beside the heavy wooden doors, listening to the quiet night beyond the walls. Their work requires patience. Many hours may pass without any sign of movement outside the castle. Still, they remain alert, watching and listening as the night deepens. Above them, the sky has darkened fully. The first stars appear between the tall outlines of the towers. From inside the courtyard, they seem distant and quiet, shining softly above the stone walls. Inside the great hall, the meal slowly reaches its end. Servants begin collecting the empty bowls from the lower tables. Wooden spoons are gathered into small baskets and carried toward the kitchen. A few people remain seated, continuing their quiet conversations. One knight leans back slightly on the bench while listening to a traveler describe the roads beyond the hills. Another group near the center table speaks softly about the coming harvest in the nearby fields. These conversations drift without urgency. Sometimes there are long pauses where no one speaks at all. During these moments, the only sounds in the hall are the small movements of people shifting on benches, the faint crackle of candles, and the quiet footsteps of servants finishing their work. The hall feels comfortable in this calm silence. Near the far wall, a dog that wandered in earlier still rests on the stone floor. It lifts its head briefly as someone walks past before settling again with a quiet sigh. Even animals seem to understand the gentle rhythm of the evening. At the high table, the Lord rises slowly from his seat. Those nearby notice and stand briefly as well. The Lord speaks a few quiet words to the household before stepping away from the table and leaving the hall through a side doorway. The rest of the hall continues its slow evening routine. Soon more people begin to stand from their seats. Some carry their cups back toward the kitchen before leaving the hall. Others step outside into the courtyard where the cool night air waits beyond the doorway. The castle gradually grows quieter, but it does not fall silent all at once. The sounds simply fade one by one as the evening continues. Outside, the torches along the courtyard walls burn steadily. Their light flickers against the stone, creating slow-moving shadows that climb and fall along the surfaces of the towers. Above the courtyard, along the high wall walk, the guard continues his steady patrol beneath the night sky. His footsteps echo softly along the stone path. Below him, the courtyard rests mostly still now. And inside the castle walls, the long day gently gives way to the quiet hours of night. The evening slowly settles into night. Inside the great hall, the final bowls are gathered and carried away toward the kitchen. A few servants remain behind, wiping the wooden tables and stacking the benches neatly along the walls. The candles continue to burn with soft, steady light. Their flames move gently whenever a door opens or someone walks past. Shadows slide slowly across the stone floor before becoming still again. The great hall begins to empty. People step outside into the courtyard where the cool night air greets them quietly. Some pause for a moment near the doorway, speaking softly before walking toward their sleeping rooms. Outside, the courtyard now feels wide and calm beneath the dark sky. Torches burn along the walls, their light reaching only a short distance into the open space. Beyond those small circles of flame, the stone ground disappears into shadow. Above the towers, the stars shine clearly. Near the stable, the horses remain peaceful. Most of them stand quietly in the straw, breathing slowly in the dim lantern light. A stable boy checks the door one final time before turning the latch gently into place. The sound of the latch is soft. Another small part of the day comes to its end. Across the courtyard, footsteps fade as the castle prepares for the quiet hours of sleep.